Aloha, friends around the world. Welcome to the sixth One Retinoblastoma World Conference. Welcome, welcome. My name is Marissa Gonzalez, and I am the president of World Eye Cancer Hope's USA chapter. And on behalf of our fellow World Eye Cancer Hope chapters in the United Kingdom, in Kenya, in Canada, and in the United States, it is my honor to officially kick off this sixth iteration of One RV World. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to everyone that has made this conference possible, and you'll hear shortly all of those names. I am really sad that we aren't in person in Hawaii. I'm currently wearing some pineapple sunglasses, a pink lei in my hair, and a blue lei around my neck. And hoping that most of you got your swag bags that included leis and some One RV World tchotchkes and sunglasses. I did get a few packages returned, and some of you might still be getting them, but this is definitely the time to be wearing your Hawaii swag. So we are so thrilled that we have over 160 people who have registered for the conference, and they represent 27 countries around the world on 6 continents. And it's kind of my joke that our penguin friends in Antarctica did not register, because I'd love to be able to say we have all 7 continents, but we're going to pretend that we do. So we're just thrilled, and as we saw from last year's conference in Ottawa, that our friends from Sick Kids Toronto put on, we were able to really reach a wide span of folks across the globe with the virtual format. So while we're sad we're not on the beach in Waikiki, we are happy that we have folks from literally every corner of the world joining us. And speaking of other corners of the world, we are thrilled that we have our local co-host this year as kind of the entire continent of Australia. When we learned that we would be in Hawaii, it made a lot of sense to kind of partner with our Pacific Rim countries and shine a light on that geographic region. And it also made sense to enlist the wonderful Sandra Staffieri to be our scientific program coordinator. So she is working with clinicians, survivors, parents, caregivers across Australia. And we're so delighted to be highlighting many folks in Australia. As you'll hear momentarily, our keynote today and our keynote tomorrow are both going to be given by Australian survivors. So we kind of say that Australia is our local co-host, which is quite a large local co-host because it's its own continent. But I would also like to really extend a heartfelt thank you to Sandra for all of the amazing work that she has done on this conference, leading the scientific portion of it. I first met Sandra in 2016 at One RV World in Dublin, where I also had the privilege of meeting a lot of the folks here on this conference for the first time. And since then, this is our 4th conference we've attended together. We've also become very good friends. She's stayed at my house in Los Angeles. We've spent the day at Disneyland together, and getting to know her over the last 5 years has been truly special. She is one of the most dedicated people I have ever met. And just during this pandemic, I've literally watched her move heaven and earth to make sure that her patients are being seen, given all of the COVID restrictions and the lockdown restrictions in Australia, be it having to try to get a patient on an airplane to get to treatment, making sure that patients are getting to their prosthetic appointments, and dealing with all of the strains of lockdown. I don't think she sleeps. And in our prep call for our survivor panel, which is coming up shortly, we joked that we wish we could clone 50 Sandras, but that's actually not a joke, because if we could clone 50 Sandras, the world would be an even better place. But she is just a fantastic, wonderful colleague, and I'm very honored to also call her a friend. So I'm now going to turn it over to Sandra.
Thank you, Marissa. You are way too kind, and I don't know if my family would like 50 versions of me. But anyway, everybody, my name's Sandra Staffieri, and I'm really excited to have co-convened this meeting with the irrepressible Marissa Gonzalez and her team. I also wish we're in Hawaii. It's a grey spring day in early morning in Melbourne, Australia, but I'm trying to get into the spirit of things with my Hawaii sunrise in the background, palm trees and a sandy beach. I've got my lei on and a little wristband, which was about all I could do given we've been in lockdown, our 6th one for about 8 weeks now. So the shops are closed. To those of you who have attended before and those for whom this is your first time, welcome. Attending my first One RB World meeting in London 2012 was indeed the line in the sand for me. At that time, I had already spent 18 years in my role as the RB Care Coordinator at the Children's Hospital in Melbourne. I could not have imagined then how my life would be now. I have been fortunate enough to attend every One RB World conference since then and never thought I would be co-convener 9 years later. I guess it would have been nice to be in Hawaii. Alas, COVID had other plans for us all, but like everything, we will get over this. I've made so many friends from across the wide world, and I always look forward to reconnecting through this meeting. And yes, Marissa, I do look forward to going to Disneyland with you again, but maybe not for 13 hours like we did last time. Through One RB World, I've witnessed the community of parents, survivors and clinicians grow, sharing their experiences from which I personally continue to learn from every day and do what I can to do better in my centre to support my patients, their families and survivors. I can attest that I care for them very differently than I did before my first One RB World. Together with my friend Marissa Gonzalez and her amazing team, Jennifer Franco, my apologies, Jen, for deleting all the presentations yesterday. Yes, everyone, it was my fault. Kristen Small, Emily Rainbolt and Abby White, we have put together a varied program exploring all aspects of living with RB. I thank in advance all the presenters from the survivor, parent and medical communities who will share their knowledge and experience so we can all learn from each other. And my thanks to all of you for joining us on this journey over the next 3 days of discovery that is sure to promote new ideas across the globe and of course spawn new friendships where we can continue to make a difference. We are One RB World. Welcome. I'd like now to introduce Cheryl Newman. So let's kick it off, who hails from regional Victoria in Australia. Wife, mother, daughter and friend. I'm going to leave Cheryl to tell you her story of thriving as a survivor.
Good morning, everyone. It's morning here in my home in Wodonga, regional Victoria, Australia. And whatever time of day or night it is for you, I'm so glad to be able to be with you today. It is both a great honour and utterly terrifying to have the responsibility of bringing this keynote address on day one of the conference. But I hope that by sharing my story, it will be a point of connection for us all and just a focus and somewhere to begin. So let me tell you a story. My family's journey with retinoblastoma began officially in November of 1968 when I was 17 months old. For some months, my parents had been saying that there was something not quite right about one of my eyes, and I had been repeatedly treated for conjunctivitis. On this November day, my mum was caring for a neighbour's ill child and took her to be seen by their family doctor. I was also present, and after the doctor had attended to the sick child, he looked at me and asked my mother, "How long has that child's eye been like that?" We had an appointment with an ophthalmologist later that same day, and my parents heard the word retinoblastoma for the first time. Within a week, we were at the Children's Hospital in Sydney, some 300 kilometres or 180 miles from our home in Canberra for my eye to be removed. The story goes that during the operation, the surgeon stepped out to tell my mother and father that they would, in fact, have to remove both eyes. Thankfully, I have absolutely no recollection of any of this. For me, growing up, retinoblastoma was the name of the eye condition that caused me to be blind. I knew that it was caused by tumours in my eye, but I didn't make a connection between the word tumour and the word cancer. The only follow-up I had was a yearly visit to the ophthalmologist until I reached the age of 5 or 6. When I was about 14, on a routine visit to our family GP, accompanied by my father, the doctor mentioned that he had followed up on Dad's inquiry as to the chances of me passing retinoblastoma on to a child if I was ever to have one. He handed my dad a letter and commented that it said that any child of mine would have a 50% chance of inheriting RB. In retrospect, I am appalled that this discussion was primarily between my father and the GP, but I'm sure that the issue was raised in my presence as a deliberate strategy to make sure that I was aware of the information without making it a big deal. At the time, I simply filed the information away as being not vaguely relevant. It, of course, became quite relevant when I married the love of my life in March 1989. Nick and I were keen to have a family, but we did have some reservations. Over time, though, we reached the conclusion that with the knowledge that a child of ours had a 50% chance of inheriting RB, they would be closely monitored and it would likely be picked up at a much earlier stage than was the case for me. Also, there was a 50% chance that the child would be free of RB. So when we learned in December of that year that I was pregnant, joy definitely outweighed apprehension. Our daughter, Rachel, was born at the end of May 1990. She was delivered at 32 weeks due to health issues of mine. Her eyes were examined twice before she left hospital with no sign of tumours. Life at home was happy and hectic with a new baby. On the day I took Rachel for her first eye exam in the ophthalmologist's office, I was planning to go on to a lunchtime meeting of the Nursing Mothers Association. But it was in that eye exam that a tumour was detected in the centre of the retina in Rachel's left eye. Even though I had been fully aware of the chance of her inheriting RB, I still felt a profound sense of shock at the news. We were referred to the Royal Children's Hospital, RCH, in Melbourne, where the diagnosis was confirmed 2 days later. The recommendation of the ophthalmology team was for 4 weeks of external beam radiation therapy. This did not sit entirely comfortably with me, as the only other person I had known with RB had been treated with radiation therapy and had developed a brain tumour and sadly died at the age of 12. I still remember how taken aback the doctors were when I suggested that the other course of possible treatment was the removal of the eye. Our consultation had been on a Friday, and it was agreed that Nick and I could have the weekend to make the decision of how we would proceed. Apart from the verbal information we were given in the appointment, this decision was made in an information vacuum and without input from any other professionals. It was, quite honestly, a largely emotional decision. We agreed to the course of radiation therapy, and it was ultimately successful in killing the tumour. The resultant scarring on the retina, though, meant that Rachel was left with only a tiny amount of peripheral vision in the eye, and the radiation also affected bone growth in the area of the temple and jaw, leaving her with what she refers to as her dent, which had significant impact in her teens and young adulthood. At the conclusion of Rachel's radiation therapy, it was recommended that she be monitored by regular examinations under anaesthetic, EUA, beginning with every 4 weeks. And so it was that we became very familiar with the 306-kilometre each-way trip between hospital and home, as well as the gut-churning anxiety of waiting to hear on every occasion whether there was any new tumour activity. Rachel did, in fact, develop several more tumours in both eyes, but all were peripheral and able to be successfully treated with cryotherapy. During the time that Rachel had been an inpatient at the Children's Hospital, I was invited to provide a blood sample that, along with a sample of Rachel's blood, was sent to Perth in Western Australia for genetic testing to determine the specific RB1 mutation that we carry. It was explained that a sample of cord blood could then be collected from any subsequent baby and genetic testing carried out to see if they had inherited that mutation. So then, when our son Jonathan was born in March 1992, that is what happened. He underwent one EUA at the age of 4 weeks, and before the next one was due, we had the results of genetic testing which found that he had not inherited retinoblastoma. One of the benefits of attending RCH with Rachel was that we met other RB families, and for a time we were very active in bringing such families together. This took the form of information sessions with doctors and also social events, which allowed for the sharing of experiences, exchange of information, and a great deal of encouragement and mutual support. And so life carried on, full and busy, with 2 growing children and all their activities, work for Nick, including a good deal of travel, much of it overseas, and for me, running the home and volunteering with our church, local disability advocacy groups, and peer support programs within the blindness community. We had a large circle of friends with whom we enjoyed spending time, and the occasional holiday or visit to family were always a highlight. Fast forward then to late 2005, when I detected a lump in my breast. Thankfully, my GP didn't delay in referring me to have it investigated. The diagnosis was DCIS, ductile carcinoma in situ, which, if left untreated, would become breast cancer. I had a lumpectomy and then a second surgery because the margins were not clear the first time round. And I was then, for the first time in my memory, referred to an oncologist for advice on next steps. It was felt that the risk of recurrence was slight, and that although radiotherapy was often recommended to mop up any stray cells in this situation, that this would not be in my best interest given the increased risk of radiation-induced cancers for people with RB. So close monitoring was the plan, and in consultation with my surgeon, I made the decision that if there was a recurrence, I would have a mastectomy. And 12 months later, that is what occurred. In the meantime, my attention was drawn to a dark spot on the inside of my right ankle. I was referred to a dermatologist who cut the spot out just to be cautious. It proved to be a superficial spreading melanoma. 6 months after that, another of these was removed from my right shoulder. I began to wonder whether this would be the pattern of the rest of my life. No one was able to tell me definitively whether my DCIS and melanomas were connected to retinoblastoma, though they agreed that it was likely. I went online and found an email list for retinoblastoma survivors and began exchanging emails with people all around the world. I learned that many of them underwent routine scans and follow-up even without having second cancers. But I could find no such program for myself and began to worry about how Rachel would be monitored once she was discharged from the care of the eye clinic at the RCH. During this time, Nick and I became increasingly concerned by some behavioural changes that we observed in Rachel. She was eventually diagnosed with a serious mental health condition, which very likely has links to the trauma that she experienced as an infant and young child through the procedures she underwent to treat and monitor RB. But that is Rachel's story for her to tell or not in her own time. I'm very pleased to be able to tell you that I have developed no further second cancers and that Rachel has remained all clear on the second cancer front. In 2016, we were accepted into the late effects clinic at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre in Melbourne, and Rachel and I have attended there ever since. So why, you may well ask, have I chosen to tell you this story? Presented in this way, it's not really uplifting. If my identity was solely that of retinoblastoma survivor, that is perhaps how my life story might read. However, it is only one aspect of who I am, and while it may influence some of my decisions, and being blind certainly has an impact on the way I live every day, I refuse to allow retinoblastoma or blindness to define me. This doesn't mean denying that these things exist, but rather incorporating their reality, making adjustments where necessary, and getting on with the pursuit of my dreams and desires. Thriving as a human being has a lot to do with nurturing all aspects of our being, the spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional. For me, this includes spending time in the worship of my God and fellowship with other believers. It's reading widely for the pleasure of enjoying creative storytelling and to learn about other people and places and to learn new skills. It means caring for my family and the home we live in and being cared for in return. It's listening to and playing music, cooking and enjoying the taste, smell, and texture of food. It's the morning walk taken with my beloved guide dog in the company of my loving and much loved husband and our pet dog, enjoying the feel of fresh air on my skin, the sound of birdsong and the smell of blossom and wet tree bark. It's spending time with friends, sharing times of celebration and times of sorrow, and lots of times just being together, cheering one another on as we journey through life side by side. It's also acknowledging the hard things like grief and loss, and learning how to sit with discomfort so that I can grow through those experiences. And that certainly includes the time when retinoblastoma makes its incursions out of the background and onto the main stage of my life. It has meant finding a way to be appropriately aware of my body and changes that may signal a problem without becoming fixated on the possibility of cancer in every lump or twinge. It has been important to become informed about risks, but I don't find it helpful to spend a lot of time and energy on this, preferring to make myself aware of where reliable information can be found so that it is at hand if required. Connecting with other survivors has enriched my life through precious friendship, a wealth and breadth of wisdom and knowledge that is truly awesome, and the kind of humour that only other survivors can truly appreciate. It has at times, though, felt a little burdensome because of what others may be going through, and I find that I need to manage my involvement carefully by occasionally taking a break. At events like this, though, the value of coming together to share and to learn, to encourage, maybe to cry and to laugh, cannot, in my opinion, be celebrated enough. Finally, let me say this. Survival is often thought of in terms of making it through a traumatic event or incident. Being a survivor, though, is so much more because it is lifelong and therefore needs to be sustainable. It will also look different for everyone because we are all unique and our circumstances, beliefs and values, culture and environments vary widely. It is my hope that during this conference, we, my fellow RB survivors, will gain knowledge and information, opportunities for connection, and perhaps even inspiration that will enhance our lives and help us to thrive. And to you, parents, take heart. there is every reason to believe that there is a bright future for your young survivors too. Thank you.